So there's Commander Vera Knox, standing in the docking bay of Harmony Station with a single military-issue duffel bag, and the kind of expression that suggests she's already calculating how many ways this could go catastrophically wrong. And let me tell you, after 3 tours fighting the Krellian death swarms and a stint diffusing sentient bombs on Proxima Beta, Vera's got a pretty comprehensive catalog of catastrophic wrongness to draw from. But here she is anyway, because apparently the Galactic Council decided that what the universe really needed was a housing integration program. You know, because nothing says peaceful coexistence quite like forcing a bunch of incompatible species to share cramped living quarters in the cold vacuum of space. It's like a reality TV show, except instead of voting people off the island, you get to watch them slowly drive each other insane with their bizarre cultural habits. Welcome to Harmony Station, declares Administrator Blorgex, sliding forward on his trail of bureaucratic slime. And yes, he's literally a slug. A 6-foot-tall, purple slug wearing what appears to be a tiny business suit stretched over his gelatinous form. The universe has a sense of humor, folks, and it's not a particularly kind one. Blorgex extends what might charitably be called a hand, though it looks more like a damp sock filled with pudding. Vera stares at it for a long moment, then gives it the briefest possible shake before discreetly wiping her hand on her pants. Professional courtesy, you understand. Commander Knox. Blorgex continues, consulting his datapad with the sort of exaggerated care that screams, "I'm very important, and you should be grateful for my attention. We're absolutely delighted to have you participate in our groundbreaking integration initiative. You'll be residing on Floor 7, our specially designated neutral zone, where species from across the galaxy learn to coexist in perfect harmony." Perfect harmony. Right. If Vera's military training has taught her anything, it's that whenever someone uses the word perfect to describe a situation involving multiple armed factions, that you should probably start looking for the nearest exit. The rules are quite simple, Blorgex continues, his voice taking on that particular tone that bureaucrats use when they're about to explain something that's anything but simple. Noise restrictions are in effect between 22 and 6 standard time, though of course we make accommodations for species with different circadian rhythms. All residents must respect each other's cultural practices, dietary requirements, and atmospheric preferences. Absolutely no violence, weapons, or hostile behavior. And naturally, any damages to station property will be deducted from your security deposit. Vera nods along, her face maintaining the sort of neutral expression she perfected during briefings about suicide missions. She's heard this song before, just with different lyrics. Rules, regulations, expectations of civilized behavior. The same sort of optimistic thinking that led to the Epsilon incident, but where 3 different species went to war because nobody bothered to mention that one group's traditional greeting involved ritual face licking. Your quarters are fully equipped with standard amenities. Blorgex drones on, and we've taken the liberty of installing atmospheric processors compatible with human respiratory requirements. Your neighbors are a diverse and fascinating group, representing some of the most advanced civilizations in our sector. I'm sure you'll find the experience quite enriching. Vera's left eye twitches slightly. In her experience, diverse and fascinating usually translates to prepare for weirdness beyond your wildest nightmares. And enriching almost always means expensive and painful. But she just nods and accepts the keycard, because what else is she going to do? The alternative is 6 months in a military detention facility for that unfortunate incident involving the ambassador from Rigel Prime and his highly flammable ceremonial headwear. Apparently, setting fire to diplomatic personnel is frowned upon, even when they're being insufferably pompous about their species' supposed superiority. So here she is, walking down Corridor 7 Alpha with her duffel bag and her rapidly diminishing optimism, wondering exactly how the Galactic Council managed to turn housing assignment into what feels suspiciously like cruel and unusual punishment. The corridor itself is clean, well-lit, and utterly soulless in that particular way that screams designed by committee. The walls are a neutral beige that offends absolutely no one while simultaneously inspiring no one, and the air has that recycled, vaguely metallic taste that's standard on space stations throughout the galaxy. Vera finds her door, slides the keycard, and steps into what the Galactic Council generously calls living quarters. It's a box. A reasonably comfortable box with a bed, a desk, and a kitchenette, but still fundamentally a box. She's lived in worse, but that doesn't make it homey. She drops her bag on the bed and takes a moment to appreciate the silence. After years of military barracks, shipboard quarters, and combat zones, the simple absence of noise feels almost luxurious. Peace and quiet. Maybe this integration thing won't be so bad after all. That's when the screaming starts. The screaming, as it turns out, is coming from 7B, right next door to Vera's new home sweet home. And it's not the kind of screaming that suggests someone's being murdered, which honestly would have been easier to deal with. No, this is rhythmic screaming, purposeful screaming. The kind of screaming that suggests someone is doing it on purpose and probably thinks they're being very spiritual about it. Vera checks her chronometer. 3:15 a.m., station time. Perfect. Perfect. She pounds on the wall, which produces absolutely no change in the screaming pattern. If anything, it gets louder, more enthusiastic. She pounds harder. And now there's a response, a sort of chittering sound that might be laughter if you're feeling generous, or the sound of something sharpening very large knives if you're not. The next morning, Vera meets her neighbor. Crix is about 7 feet tall, mantis-like, with compound eyes that seem to judge everything they look at and find it spiritually lacking. He's wearing what appears to be a meditation robe made from some sort of shimmery fabric that probably costs more than Vera's annual salary. "Ah, the new resident," Crix says, his voice carrying that particular combination of serenity and condescension that spiritual types perfect after years of practice. "I trust my morning devotions did not disturb your rest. The practice of transcendent vocal release is essential for achieving harmony with the cosmic vibrations of the universe." Vera stares at him. "You were screaming at 3 in the morning." "I was communing with the eternal mysteries of existence," Crix corrects gently. "Perhaps if you opened your consciousness to the deeper rhythms of reality, you would understand that what you call screaming is actually a profound expression of spiritual awakening." Right. Vera makes a mental note to invest in earplugs, industrial-strength ones. Her next encounter comes courtesy of the Fluffington family from 7C. The Fluffingtons are, objectively speaking, adorable. They look like a cross between hamsters and teddy bears, with big round eyes and soft, fluffy fur that practically begs to be petted. There are 5 of them, all chattering excitedly in their high-pitched native language as they explore the corridor. They're also eating the wall. Not nibbling, not gnawing, actually eating. Taking big, enthusiastic bites out of the metal paneling like it's some sort of exotic delicacy. Vera watches in fascination as the smallest one, who can't be more than 3 feet tall, chews through a support beam with the casual efficiency of an industrial demolition unit. "Oh, hello there," says what appears to be Papa Fluffington, noticing Vera's presence. His standard Galactic is heavily accented but perfectly understandable. "So sorry about the mess. The little ones are going through a growth spurt, you understand. Everything looks so delicious to them at this age." As if to emphasize the point, one of the offspring takes an experimental bite out of Vera's door frame. The metal crunches like a potato chip. "Perhaps," Papa Fluffington continues hopefully, "you might have some of those wonderful human food items. We have heard such marvelous things about your species' cuisine. So many interesting textures and chemical compositions." Vera backs slowly toward her door. I'll see what I have." She makes it inside just as the youngest Fluffington discovers that door controls are apparently quite tasty. The sound of enthusiastic munching follows her through the supposedly soundproof walls. But wait, there's more. Because Floor 7 wouldn't be complete without Zephyr from 7D. A gaseous entity who exists as a sort of sentient cloud contained within an environmental suit that makes him look like a walking terrarium. Zephyr is, by all accounts, the nicest being Vera has ever met. He's polite, considerate, and genuinely concerned about everyone's well-being. He's also accidentally poisonous to approximately 97% of known life forms. "Good morning, new neighbor," Zephyr says cheerfully, his voice coming through speakers mounted on his containment suit. I do hope you slept well despite Crix's devotional practices. I've been meaning to speak with him about the timing, but I wouldn't want to interfere with his spiritual journey. Vera feels her eyes start to water. There's a faint greenish tinge to the air around Zephyr's suit, and her respiratory system is beginning to object strenuously to whatever it is he's breathing out. "Oh dear," Zephyr says, noticing Vera's increasingly desperate gasping. "I'm so terribly sorry. I've been having some difficulty with my filtration system lately. The atmospheric processors on this floor weren't really designed for my particular metabolic byproducts. I've submitted a maintenance request, but you know how these things go." Vera nods weakly and retreats to her quarters, where she spends the next hour coughing up what tastes like industrial solvent mixed with regret. So let's recap, shall we? In the space of less than 24 hours, Vera has acquired a spiritually enlightened mantis who thinks screaming at 3 a.m. is a religious experience, a family of adorable demolition experts who view the entire station as an all-you-can-eat buffet, and a polite genocidal gas cloud who could accidentally wipe out a small city just by having a bad day with his air filters. And according to Administrator Blorgex's cheerful orientation packet, this is just the beginning. There are 12 other residents on floor 7, each representing a different species, each with their own unique cultural practices and lifestyle requirements. Vera sits on her bed, staring at the wall that separates her from Crix's meditation chamber, listening to what sounds like a pack of wild animals being fed through a wood chipper but is apparently a traditional Fluffington lullaby. The toxic fog seeping under her door suggests that Zephyr's filtration problems are getting worse, not better. She survived 3 wars, countless diplomatic disasters, and that incident on Kepler Station where the artificial gravity failed during a formal dinner with the Andromedian Trade Council. She's been shot at, blown up, poisoned, and once had to fight her way out of a collapsing space mine using nothing but a broken plasma torch and sheer bloody-minded determination. But this might actually kill her. 1 week? That's how long it takes for Vera to go from determined to make this work to actively planning elaborate revenge scenarios. 7 days of sleepless nights, toxic air, and watching her quarters slowly disappear one nibble at a time as the Fluffington family treats her living space like their personal snack bar. Day 1 was the screaming. Day 2 brought the discovery that the Fluffingtons had eaten through her water recycling system, flooding her floor with 3 inches of vaguely luminescent liquid that smelled like wet dog and broken dreams. Day 3 was when Zephyr's filtration system suffered what he cheerfully called a minor malfunction, filling the entire corridor with a toxic fog that made her vision go all wobbly and her teeth itch. By day 4, Vera had submitted her first official complaint to Administrator Blorgex. By day 5, she'd submitted her 17th. Each one was met with the same bureaucratic response. The Galactic Housing Integration Program is committed to fostering understanding between species through shared living experiences. Minor inconveniences are part of the learning process. Minor inconveniences. Right. Day 6 was when the Fluffingtons discovered that fiber optic cables are apparently considered a delicacy in their culture. Vera lost communications, environmental controls, and écriture, nunchien, her sanity in rapid succession, as the adorable little monsters turned her high-tech living quarters into something resembling a cave with very expensive rubble scattered around it. But day 7 was special. Day 7 was when the youngest Fluffington, in an excess of enthusiasm for structural engineering consumption, ate through the wall between Vera's quarters and the outer hull of the station. Vera wakes up to the distinctive sound of explosive decompression, that whistling shriek that every spacer learns to fear on a primal level. She opens her eyes to find a Fluffington-sized hole in her wall, with the cold vacuum of space visible through it like the universe's most unwelcome window. Emergency klaxons are blaring, atmospheric force fields are kicking in, and allied. All. Somewhere in the distance she can hear Papa Fluffington apologizing profusely in his squeaky little voice while his offspring continues to munch contentedly on what used to be iron load-bearing structural components. The emergency repair crew that shows up consists of 3 bored-looking technicians, who treat the whole incident like a routine maintenance call. Apparently this sort of thing happens often enough that they've got a standard procedure for it. They patch the hole, reset the atmospheric processors, and hand Vera a bill for damages that's roughly equivalent to her yearly housing allowance. Standard deductible for structural modifications, the lead technician explains with the sort of cheerful indifference that suggests he's had this conversation many times before. The Fluffington family is registered as a protected cultural species, so their dietary practices are considered a religious freedom issue. Can't discriminate against them just because they happen to metabolize refined metals and composite materials. Vera stares at the bill, then at the patch job on her wall, then at the cheerful little family of demolition experts who are now eyeing her bed frame with obvious culinary interest. Something inside her brain makes a sound like a circuit breaker tripping. She marches to Administrator Blorgex's office, still wearing her emergency vacuum suit, because her quarters are still being decontaminated after Zephyr's latest minor atmospheric leak. The slug looks up from his paperwork with the sort of polite attention that bureaucrats reserve for problems they're planning to ignore. "Commander Knox," he says pleasantly. "I trust the emergency repair went smoothly. These little incidents are quite common during the adjustment period. Integration is a process, you understand." "Integration," Vera repeats slowly. Her voice has gone very quiet, very controlled. It's the sort of voice she used right before ordering orbital bombardments during the Krillian campaign. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You've put me in a metal box with a creature that screams at 3 in the morning for religious reasons. A family of adorable monsters that are literally eating the space station. And a sentient chemical weapon who keeps apologizing while he accidentally tries to murder everyone in the corridor. Now, Commander, that's a rather uncharitable way to describe your neighbors. Crix is a renowned spiritual leader among his people. The Fluffington family represents one of the galaxy's most ancient and respected cultures. And Zephyr is simply experiencing some minor technical difficulties with his life support systems." "Minor technical difficulties," Vera says. "Right. No. And I suppose it's also a minor technical difficulty that I nearly got sucked into space this morning, because something the size of a teddy bear ate through the hull of your cross station." Blorgex spreads his hands in a gesture that might be apologetic if it weren't so obviously rehearsed. "These are growing pains, Commander. The integration process requires patience, understanding, and most importantly, adaptability. Perhaps the issue isn't with your neighbors, but with your own flexibility in accepting diverse cultural practices." Adaptability. There's that word again. Vera has heard it a lot lately, usually right before someone asks her to accept something completely unreasonable as perfectly normal. She's been adapting her entire career, rolling with punches that would flatten lesser humans, finding ways to survive in situations that would send most people screaming for the nearest therapy couch. But this isn't about adaptation. This is about some bureaucratic genius deciding that the best way to promote interspecies cooperation is to trap incompatible life forms in a confined space and see what happens. It's like throwing a lit match into a munitions depot and calling it a fireworks display. "You want to see adaptability," Vera says quietly. "You want to see how flexible humans can be when we put our minds to it." "Exactly," Blorgex beams. "I knew you'd come around to seeing the positive aspects of this experience." Vera stands up, her movements precise and controlled in a way that would make her old drill sergeant proud. "Oh, I'm going to adapt, Administrator. I'm going to adapt so hard it'll make your eye stalks curl." She walks out of his office with the sort of purposeful stride that suggests someone has just made a very important decision. Behind her, Blorgex makes a note in his file about the promising progress of human integration subject 7A. He has no idea what he's just unleashed. Here's the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy consistently fails to understand. We're not just adaptable, we're creatively, vindictively, magnificently adaptable. Give us a problem, and we won't just solve it. We'll solve it in ways that make the problem wish it had never existed in the first place. Vera spends 3 days in what she calls tactical planning mode, which involves a lot of pacing, muttering, and the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for defusing bombs or planning military campaigns. She requisitions supplies through the station's automated systems, citing cultural accommodation needs and environmental optimization requirements. The beauty of bureaucracy is that if you use the right keywords, You can order almost anything and some underpaid clerk will approve it without actually reading what you're asking for. The first target is Crix and his 3 a.m. spiritual awakening sessions. Vera's solution is elegantly simple. If he wants to commune with cosmic vibrations, she'll give him cosmic vibrations. She installs a high-end audio system in her quarters, the kind of military-grade equipment designed to cut through battlefield noise and electromagnetic interference. Then she loads it with what she considers the finest examples of human musical expression, death metal, industrial techno, and a particularly aggressive form of experimental jazz that sounds like someone torturing a saxophone while robots fight in the background. The first time Crix starts his meditative screaming at 3:15 a.m., Vera responds at 3:16 with the complete discography of a band called Thermonuclear Intestinal Disruption played at volumes typically reserved for crowd control. The walls shake, the floor vibrates, and somewhere in the distance, a minor structural alarm starts beeping in protest. Crix's screaming stops immediately. Vera keeps playing for exactly as long as his meditation session usually lasts, then shuts off the music and goes back to sleep. The next morning she meets Crix in the corridor. He looks deeply disturbed, his compound eyes showing what might be shell shock if mantis-like beings are capable of shell shock. The cosmic harmonies, he says weakly, they have been disturbed by aggressive sonic pollution. My connection to the universal consciousness has been severed by what can only be described as auditory violence. Gosh, Vera says with the sort of false sympathy that could cut glass. That sounds really spiritually traumatic. Maybe you could try meditating at a more reasonable hour, when the cosmic harmonies are less likely to be disturbed by my cultural practices. Crix tries the 3 a.m. screaming exactly once more. Vera responds with something called apocalyptic breakfast nightmare followed by a 40-minute drum solo that apparently achieved sentience sometime during the recording process and decided to hold the listener's sanity hostage. After that, Crix discovers that his spiritual practices work just as well at 3 in the afternoon, when normal people are awake and can properly appreciate his transcendent vocal releases. The Fluffington problem requires a more sophisticated approach. You can't exactly fight adorable demolition experts with direct confrontation, especially when there are protected cultural species with enough legal backing to turn any complaint into an interspecies incident. But Vera didn't survive 3 wars by fighting fair. She studies their eating patterns, their movement habits, their preferred snack foods. The Fluffingtons are creatures of habit, following predictable routes through the station as they search for new culinary adventures. They're also highly food-motivated, easily distracted by anything that tastes better than whatever they're currently eating. Vera constructs what she calls the Buffet Trail, an elaborate obstacle course of delicious structural materials that leads from her quarters to a very specific destination. She starts with samples of exotic alloys placed strategically in the corridor, each one slightly tastier than the last according to her careful research into Fluffington dietary preferences. The trail wends through maintenance passages, up service lifts, and finally terminates in Administrator Blorgex's office. The execution is flawless. The Fluffington family discovers the first sample while making their usual evening rounds, and from there, it's just a matter of following their natural instincts. They munch their way enthusiastically through the trail, chittering excitedly about the wonderful variety of flavors and textures, but completely unaware that they're being guided like furry, adorable missiles toward a very specific target. Blorgex's panicked calls for emergency repair crews start coming in around 2 a.m. By morning, his office resembles a natural disaster site, if natural disasters specialized in eating everything that wasn't nailed down and then eating the nails for dessert. The Fluffingtons are found sleeping contentedly in the ruins of his desk, their bellies full of premium office furniture and filing systems. Cultural dietary practices, Vera explains innocently when Blorgex demands an explanation. You said it yourself, Administrator. We can't discriminate against them just because they happen to metabolize refined metals and composite materials. The Zephyr situation requires the most delicate touch, because he's genuinely a nice person who's just accidentally lethal to most forms of life. Vera can't bring herself to actively sabotage someone who spends most of his time apologizing for existing, so instead she redirects the problem. She installs a custom ventilation system in her quarters, complete with atmospheric sensors, chemical analyzers, and automated response protocols. But instead of just filtering out Zephyr's toxic exhalations, the system carefully collects them and channels them through the station's existing air circulation network to a very specific location, the complaint department office. It's poetic justice, really. Every time someone in the station files a complaint about noise, structural damage, or atmospheric toxicity, they get to experience a concentrated dose of exactly what they're complaining about. The effect is immediate and profound. Complaint volume drops by 97% within the first week, mostly because the complaint department staff keeps calling in sick with mysterious respiratory ailments that doctors can't quite identify. Zephyr, meanwhile, is thrilled that his filtration problems seem to have resolved themselves. His atmospheric readings show perfect environmental balance in his quarters, and he's no longer accidentally poisoning his neighbors. He starts baking cookies as a thank you gesture, which is surprisingly thoughtful, even if the cookies do taste faintly of industrial solvent. The beauty of Vera's solutions is that they're all technically within the rules. She hasn't committed any acts of violence, hasn't damaged station property that wasn't already being eaten by the Fluffingtons, and hasn't violated any of the cultural accommodation policies that protect her neighbor's right to be insufferably annoying. She's just proven that humans, when properly motivated, can be insufferably annoying right back. The other residents of Floor 7 start requesting transfers. First one, then 3, then everyone except her immediate neighbors, and a few particularly brave souls who are apparently fascinated by the ongoing spectacle. The transfer requests cite cultural incompatibility, environmental concerns, and in one memorable case, aggressive sonic terrorism by the human resident. Administrator Blorgex is too busy dealing with his own problems to pay much attention to the exodus. His office is still being repaired from the Great Fluffington Feast. The complaint department has been effectively shut down due to mysterious atmospheric contamination. And he's receiving increasingly frantic calls from residents throughout the station who want to know why their air smells like chemical warfare and regret. Vera, meanwhile, sits in her quarters and enjoys the growing peace and quiet. Her neighbors have found more appropriate times for their cultural practices, the structural damage has been relocated to more deserving targets, and the air quality in her immediate vicinity has never been better. She's adapted all right. She's adapted so thoroughly that Floor 7 is becoming exactly what she wanted it to be from the beginning, a place where she can live in peace. The fact that everyone else is fleeing in terror is just a pleasant bonus. Word travels fast in a space station, especially when that word involves explosive decompression, mysterious toxic gas attacks, and what the security reports diplomatically describe as unauthorized structural modifications by protected wildlife. Within 2 weeks of Vera's adaptation campaign, Floor 7 has achieved a reputation that extends far beyond Harmony Station. It starts with the insurance investigation. Apparently, when an entire residential floor experiences a 90% turnover rate in less than a month, accompanied by property damage claims that read like a catalog of natural disasters, certain regulatory agencies take notice. The Galactic Insurance Consortium sends Inspector Vralik, a methodical beetle-like being with the sort of obsessive attention to detail that makes accountants look spontaneous. Inspector Vralik lasts exactly 47 minutes on Floor 7. He arrives during one of Zephyr's minor atmospheric fluctuations, which Vera's ventilation system dutifully redirects to the corridor where the inspector is conducting his investigation. While Vralik is trying to figure out why his breathing apparatus keeps triggering contamination alarms, he encounters the Fluffington family, who have recently discovered that inspection equipment contains several rare minerals that are apparently considered delicacies in their culture. The inspector's final report is a masterpiece of bureaucratic horror. It describes Floor 7 as an ongoing hazard to station integrity, resident safety, and the fundamental laws of physics. The recommended course of action is immediate evacuation and quarantine, with a strong suggestion that the entire floor be jettisoned into the nearest star for the safety of galactic civilization. But the insurance investigation is just the beginning. News of Floor 7 spreads through the standard channels that carry gossip, disaster reports, and cautionary tales throughout the galaxy. The stories get bigger with each telling, as stories tend to do, until Floor 7 becomes less of a residential area and more of a legend. Diplomatic personnel start using pulling a floor 7 as shorthand for any situation where cultural accommodation goes catastrophically wrong. Military strategists study Vera's tactics as an example of asymmetric warfare conducted within the constraints of civilized society. There's even a scholarly paper published in the Journal of Xenosociology titled Human Adaptability as a Weapon of Mass Disruption, a case study in creative problem solving. The real trouble starts when the media gets involved. A reporter from the Galactic Broadcasting Network arrives to do an expose on the Housing Integration Program, expecting to find a heartwarming story about different species learning to live together in harmony. Instead, she finds what can only be described as a localized apocalypse conducted with military precision and cheerful politeness. Her broadcast, titled The Human Who Broke an Entire Floor, goes viral across 17 different media networks and gets translated into 43 languages, including 3 that had to invent new words just to describe what Vera accomplished. The segment features dramatic footage of hazmat teams investigating mysterious atmospheric contamination, structural engineers trying to figure out how someone managed to weaponize adorable rodents, and Administrator Blorgex giving increasingly desperate interviews from what's left of his office. The integration program is working exactly as designed, Blorgex insists, his voice reaching pitches that suggest his slime production is under considerable stress. Minor cultural adjustments are a normal part of the process. Commander Knox is simply a very enthusiastic participant in our diversity initiatives. The reporter's follow-up questions focus on why minor cultural adjustments have resulted in quarantining an entire residential floor and why 3 different species have filed formal complaints with the Galactic Council claiming that humans should be classified as a hazardous biological weapon. Things get worse when the Galactic Tourism Board decides that Floor 7 has become such a notorious landmark that they should officially recognize it as a destination. They start offering guided tours from a safe distance, complete with protective equipment and legal waivers that span 14 pages in standard galactic script. The tours are surprisingly popular. Visitors come from across the galaxy to witness the legendary Floor 7, where a single human somehow managed to turn routine housing complaints into an interspecies incident that's being studied by military colleges and diplomatic academies. They peer through reinforced observation windows at the infamous corridor, where Inspector Vralik suffered his mysterious respiratory emergency, and they take pictures of the blast doors that now permanently seal off the area where the Fluffingtons staged their great office feast. But the real crisis comes when the Galactic Housing Committee receives a formal petition signed by representatives from 47 different species, demanding that humans be permanently banned from all future integration programs. The petition describes humans as a clear and present danger to peaceful coexistence, citing Vera's activities as evidence that human adaptability is fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. The committee's emergency session is broadcast live across the galaxy, because apparently everyone wants to watch the formal debate over whether an entire species should be banned from government housing programs due to the actions of one extremely irritated ex-military officer. Administrator Blorgex testifies from his temporary office, a converted supply closet that the Fluffingtons haven't discovered yet. He attempts to defend the integration program while simultaneously requesting hazard pay, additional security personnel, and permission to relocate his administrative functions to a different station entirely. Commander Knox has technically violated no regulations, he admits reluctantly. Her methods are unconventional, but they fall within the legal parameters of cultural accommodation and species-specific adaptation protocols. The committee chair being a dignified crystalline entity whose species evolved beyond the need for patience several million years ago, cuts straight to the point. Administrator Blorgex, in your professional opinion, is Floor 7 currently habitable by standard life forms? Well, Blorgex hedges, that depends on how you define habitable and standard and frankly life forms. The committee's verdict is swift and decisive. Floor 7 is officially designated as a restricted zone, kept suitable for normal residential use, and accessible only to authorized personnel with appropriate protective equipment. The entire floor is quarantined indefinitely, pending further study by teams of xenobiologists, structural engineers, and what the official report describes as specialists in human-generated chaos management. Vera, meanwhile, sits in her quarters and watches the proceedings with the satisfaction of someone who has achieved exactly what she set out to accomplish. She's got peace, quiet, and an entire floor to herself. The fact that she's also become the first human to single-handedly create a galactic diplomatic incident through creative application of housing policies is just a pleasant bonus. She's finally got the living situation she wanted. It just took turning the entire concept of interspecies cooperation into a cautionary tale to get it. 5 years later, Floor 7 of Harmony Station has achieved a status that transcends mere notoriety and enters the realm of galactic legend. It's mentioned in the same conversations as the black hole of Andromeda and the temporal anomaly at Rigel Prime, except instead of being a natural disaster, no, it's a human-generated phenomenon that continues to baffle scientists and terrify administrators throughout the galaxy. The official designation is now Restricted Research Zone 7 Alpha, but everyone just calls it the Ghost Zone. Not because it's haunted by the spirits of the dead, but because it's inhabited by something far more unsettling. A perfectly content human who has achieved absolute victory through the simple expedient of making everyone else's life so curly unpleasant that they voluntarily surrendered an entire residential floor rather than continue dealing with her. Vera still lives there, of course. Her quarters have been significantly upgraded over the years, partly due to insurance settlements from the various incidents, and partly because the station administration discovered that keeping her happy is considerably cheaper than dealing with the alternative. She's got a full kitchen now, a proper workshop, and what might generously be called a living room if you ignore the fact that it's filled with monitoring equipment designed to track potential security breaches. The monitoring equipment is necessary because Floor 7 has become something of a pilgrimage site. Young aliens from across the galaxy make the journey to Harmony Station just to stand outside the blast doors and to contemplate the legendary human who single-handedly redefined the concept of cultural accommodation. They leave offerings, mostly in the form of noise-canceling devices and structural reinforcement materials, which Vera occasionally accepts if they're particularly useful or amusing. The academic community has embraced Floor 7 as a case study in everything from military strategy to sociology to xenopsychology. There are entire university courses devoted to analyzing Vera's techniques, with titles like Asymmetric Conflict Resolution in Multicultural Environments and Applied Human Stubbornness as a Diplomatic Tool. The most popular course, offered at the prestigious Galactic Military Academy, is simply called How to Win Without Fighting, a masterclass in strategic annoyance. Vera occasionally gets requests for interviews, book deals, and speaking engagements. She declines them all with the sort of polite firmness that suggests the reporters might want to consider alternative career paths if they keep pushing. The one exception was a documentary crew that managed to get permission for a remote interview conducted through the station's communication system from a safe distance of approximately 3 sectors. The documentary, titled The Ghost Zone, A Human Solution to an Alien Problem, won several awards and sparked a brief fashion trend among young humans who started referring to creative problem-solving as going full Knox. The trend died out when several copycat attempts resulted in disciplinary actions, insurance claims, and in one memorable case, the small war, incidentally, was resolved when both governments received a tersely worded communication from Vera herself, suggesting that if they were going to fight over who had the right to claim her methods as inspiration, they might want to consider whether they really understood what they were getting themselves into. The war ended within hours, with both sides issuing formal apologies and a joint statement declaring Floor 7 a neutral zone of cultural significance. The station's gift shop now sells Floor 7 merchandise, including t-shirts with slogans like "I survived the Ghost Zone and my friend went to Harmony Station and all I got was this lousy t-shirt and mild PTSD." The bestseller is a small device that plays a recording of Vera saying "that's nice," the air in the particular tone she uses when she's about to do something that will require extensive paperwork to clean up. The current station commander, Admiral Zeth Cry, the 7th person to hold the position since Vera's arrival, has developed what historians will probably call the Knox Doctrine. The basic principle is simple: some problems are best solved by strategic retreat and containment rather than direct confrontation. It's been surprisingly effective, leading to a 47% reduction in interspecies incidents and a corresponding increase in station morale, primarily because everyone knows that no matter what goes wrong, it's probably not as bad as whatever Vera might do if she gets involved. The most recent addition to Floor 7's legend came when a group of cephalopoid military strategists attempted to infiltrate the floor using advanced stealth technology. They made it approximately 17 minutes before Vera politely informed them over the intercom that their cloaking devices were interfering with her evening meditation, and would they please either turn them off or take them somewhere else. When they ignored her request, she began playing what she described as relaxing earth music at a volume that caused several nearby bulkheads to develop stress fractures. The cephalopoids surrendered by sending a formal note of apology written in what appeared to be their own bioluminescent ink, though Vera suspected it might have been something else entirely. She kept the note as a bookmark, which somehow made the surrender even more devastating to their military pride. These days, Vera spends her time much as she always has, reading, tinkering with various projects, and maintaining Floor 7 with the sort of casual competence that makes it clear she could expand her territory anytime she wanted to, but simply chooses not to because she's perfectly happy with what she has. The implicit threat of expansion is considered one of the galaxy's most effective deterrents to unnecessary bureaucratic interference. The station runs more smoothly now than it ever did before Vera's arrival. There's an unspoken understanding among the residents that, as long as everyone minds their own business and doesn't do anything that might disturb the human on Floor 7, that life can proceed with a pleasant lack of drama. It's the sort of peace that comes not from the absence of conflict, but from the presence of something far more terrifying than any conflict anyone can imagine. And in her quarters on Floor 7, Vera Knox continues to live her quiet life, secure in the knowledge that she has achieved something truly remarkable. A home where nobody bothers her, nobody tells her what to do, and nobody questions her methods of interior decoration, no matter how structurally inadvisable they might appear to be. It's exactly what she wanted all along. The galaxy, meanwhile, has learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of underestimating a human who just wants to be left alone. It's a lesson that will probably echo through diplomatic circles for centuries to come, usually in the form of nervous laughter and the phrase, "At least we're not dealing with another Knox situation." Some victories, after all, are so complete that they become their own form of immortality.